Well, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Roger Caswell, Executive Director of the Jones Institute for Educational Excellence, and I have the great privilege to be having a seminar today with these 7 Master Teachers of 2015. In preparing for today, I tried to think for myself, if I was a pre-service teacher, what kind of answers would I want to have? And that's what guided me as I wrote these questions. The format's a little different this year, so if you're inclined to take notes, it should be easier. They're going to introduce themselves first, then I'll ask a question. Each member has no more than 10 words to answer, so everyone will answer the question, and then we'll go back and they will pick who's going to elaborate further. And we'll go to the next question and just follow that process. So you're going to hear from every single one of them for at least 10 words or longer. So first off, we're going to let them introduce themselves. As they introduce themselves, they will state their name, their school district, the grade level subject matter that they teach, and the number of years they have taught. So we will start right here with Carmen.
Hello, I am Carmen Cantrell, Shawnee Mission School District, Indian Hills Middle School, 7th and 8th grade. I'm a special education teacher, and I spend my day in general education, co-teaching with 7th and 8th grade language arts teachers. I've been doing this for 35 years.
Good afternoon. I'm Barbara Clark. I'm from the Manhattan-Ogden School District. I teach 4th grade at Northview Elementary. I am a general education, elementary education teacher, and I too have been doing this for 35 years.
Corey Green. I teach at El Dorado in El Dorado Middle School. I am 8th grade social studies and have been teaching a whole 7 years.
I'm Leslie McAfee. I teach high school at Piper High School in Kansas City, Kansas in the Piper School District. I teach Algebra 1 to 9th grade, and I've been doing that for 21 years.
My name is Bill MacFarland. I teach at the Auburn Washburn School District in Topeka. I teach at Washburn Rural Middle School. I teach 7th grade social studies, and I've been doing this for 38 years.
I'm Reed Uthe. I teach at Lakewood Middle School, which is in the Blue Valley School District in Overland Park. I teach speech and theater. I've been doing that for the last 13 years, but previous to that I taught elementary ed, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade for 13 years, so 26 years.
I'm Ginger Steck, and I teach in the Andover Schools, District 385, and it's just outside of Wichita. It's a suburb. And I teach at Andover Central Middle School, grades 6 through 8, but I had taught previously, I'm the 4th year there, but before that I was 12 years in elementary, and I've taught all grades. And this is my 24th year in public education.
If I did my math correctly, we have 186 years of experience up here on this board, so I think we're in for a treat. Okay, the first question today is, what philosophical belief has been the easiest to maintain throughout your career?
All students can learn.
This is going to get redundant, but I wrote that children are children and all children can learn.
All students can learn.
That it's important to connect with each student.
Everyone is important and worthy of our respect.
All children can learn with the right teachers and instruction.
And mine's a combo. All children can learn, and they're all gifted in some way. You just have to discover how and where.
Okay, so thank you. So we want to open this up for a little further discussion on this.
When we talked about this prior to the seminar, we were in awe and thankful that all of us had basically the same answer. As we discussed further, we realized that we really did agree that all means all in this case. We did, with specificity, say that all students can learn with a certain type of teacher who has made a connection with we also realize that not all students are going to learn in the same way, on the same day, at the same time, with the same techniques. It sounds simple. Simple doesn't always mean easy. But we do agree that all students can learn.
Anybody else gonna jump in?
There's so much agreement that we didn't.
It's a united front.
Yeah.
And then to partner with this one, what philosophical belief has been the most difficult to maintain throughout your career?
That I can meet everyone's needs, every day, all the time.
And mine was making sure that I met the needs of the varied needs of the kids in my class.
True differentiation.
That I can provide the time all students need to be successful.
I would agree with the previous speakers, the time to be able to differentiate, to meet the needs of our students.
Balancing individualizing education or instruction, but then having to deal with standardized assessments.
And mine is how to balance process versus product. How to balance how much time to spend on the learning of the information and how much time in the application of that information. And yes, my area is art. I'm also certified in science. And I have always struggled with this, sometimes feeling like I had a better grasp and sometimes feeling like I'm still figuring it out. But the process is often where people focus on before assessments and things, and the product is sometimes overlooked because the process has been made more important. In art, you could learn a lot of different mediums and how to apply them and how to use them, but you won't have anything to show when you get done that shows that you've applied what you've learned. So I'm sure that there's other people here that can speak to some of that too.
The question talked about the difficulty of maintaining a philosophy. And to me, this was the hardest one to answer. It said, which one was the most difficult to maintain? I'm not sure maintaining the philosophy is what was the problem, but just, as you were saying, the application of that philosophy. And sometimes there are things that we want to get done that end up not being done, either because it's overwhelming or the time constraints or other constraints that we have.
And I think at the elementary level, process versus product in art or speech class is really obvious. But even at the elementary level, you're talking about using manipulatives in math class or teaching a concept using a hands-on science process rather than reading it from a textbook or watching a YouTube video. The hands-on, the more you get them involved, the more time it takes to plan, the more needs you need to, the greater the variety of needs you need to plan for. So it all impacts your instruction.
Anybody else have anything to add? Okay, then I will open up to the audience if you have a question concerning philosophy, because I'm sure you've been doing a lot of concentration on, as you get ready to go into your classroom, what philosophical beliefs do you have? Here's an opportunity to ask some questions based on what you believe is your philosophy. So any questions?
I'll make a comment.
Okay, thank you.
A philosophy is real easy to put together, but you really need to think about it. Whenever I put together my philosophy in 1975, it took me quite a while. I believe that every child can learn. And I thought, oh, this is a no-brainer. Everybody believes that. Not so. When you put together your philosophy, make sure you think of examples of the best teaching and what you expect out of yourselves. Some people don't believe that everybody can learn, that it's for some and not for others. So make sure whenever you're putting this together, you think about who you are and who you want to be. Think about those exemplars you have in your lifetime that exhibit those qualities, and use that to base your philosophy on. Uh-oh. I didn't know.
So you guys have said that all students can learn. Just kind of playing with the verbiage a little bit, do you think that all students will learn? Kind of thinking about students maybe are very unmotivated to learn or seem unwilling.
They're going to learn something, whether it's what you want them to learn. I taught at the university for a while, and I would have student teachers come back and say, you would not believe what that teacher has me doing, blah, 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 and this is what's happening. And one of the things I told them is, no matter what's happening, you're going to learn something. You're going to learn what you want to do, and some of the best examples, or I am never going to do that. Your students in the classroom are the same way. They're going to learn something, how to press your buttons and make you react in a certain way, or if you approach it the right way, maybe what you want them to learn.
I think,
Yep.
going off of that, all students will learn. I think they will if you find the right connection that you make with them. That's where that flexibility, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes, but being able to individualize instruction as much as you can within that parameter of everything becoming more and more standardized. They will learn if you find the way to reach them, to be creative, to try to find what motivates them. That's a big thing. Can they learn? Yes, we all believe that they all can learn. Will they? That's up to us and up to them and up to a lot of factors around. But that's the goal. That's what we're here for.
And this year you have a panel of majority middle school. I think that's one of the strengths of middle school, in that if you're in a team environment, while your personality may not mesh with this student's personality, out of the 4 of you, there's probably going to be one of you that you can kind of have that touchstone person that knows how to work with that student, that can get, because you have 4 distinct personalities, generally 4 very different teaching styles, and if you really work together as a team, you can pretty much get all of your, all your students on the same page, as long as you're working together. And we're going to cover that a little bit more too.
Okay, great question. Another question? Yes.
Talking about the philosophy of being able to differentiate instruction and how that can be a struggle at times. What would be your advice in teaching and meeting the needs of the majority of the students, but there's that one student that you know will not be on task during direct instruction or during projects, that you have to be by their desk in order for them to get their instruction done, to get the assignment done, project done, or just for them to remain on task. So how would you advise us as teachers if we don't have an aide in the classroom or someone to help that student directly and without giving away the other 19 students in your classroom just to focus on that one? So how would you balance that as a teacher?
I think you came up with a good, you did the hardest part. You identified the problem, and you have at least one strategy for solving the problem. Standing by the child, putting in a group that is proximally closest to you, keeping your eye on him all the time.
I try to put it in the kids' lap to make the decision as to what will help them the best. If you make all the decisions for them, a lot of those kids that are already problems just feel like you're making all these choices for them and they're not happy with those. But if you will turn it around and talk to them and say, what would help the most? Would it help if you worked with another student? Would it help if you stayed and worked with me? Would it help if you were in the front? If they will tell you, if you give them a chance, they will usually tell you what will help them the most. And so I think it's important to listen to them. They might be a little ornery and say, oh, it would work if I worked with my best friend Joe, But you give them one day of that, and then you tell them to choose again. But putting the decision, making them part of the decision helps a lot.
And sometimes they will shock you because they will say, you know what? if I sit there, I'm gonna talk to them the whole time, so could I? And sometimes they'll come up to you on the slide and be like, I need to move tables, because I really don't think, I mean, granted, this is middle school, I don't know if elementary quite has that awareness. But, I mean, they'll shock you sometimes at how self-aware they are.
I also think you have to think about what are your expectations for that student, because your expectation for him to be like the other 19 and sit quietly probably is not going to be realistic a lot, so you just have to understand that I can't expect that, so what can I do to capitalize on that? When I taught 4th grade my first year back in 1874, little Frankie Hansen was my eraser man. He stood up by the chalkboard, which we had back in the day, and he would be my eraser man, and because he had to be up doing something. So you find what can engage them, but also, yeah, make that connection. But also, I really think you have to try to figure out what's a realistic expectation for this child. What can I expect for that? And then don't get down on yourself if you can't get them to be exactly like the other 19 kids in the class.
I would like to add to that too, because my son is one of those kids that likes to stand. And so he is someone that the teacher puts in the back of the room so that he can stand while he does his work. And that is what he needs. And so she has her standers, back there. You have to kind of get out of your comfort zone and go with what the kid needs, go with what the student needs. And the other thing is it's really big right now, and you've probably heard it a billion times, and that is voice and choice. And that's what they're talking about up here, is that the kids want a voice, and what happens to them, and how they get to interact, and whether they get to do something. Even if you say, okay, apple or orange, and you've taken away a whole bunch of choices, they still have a choice. And then when they get to interact with you personally and make that choice with you, then they feel like they have a voice. And so I think that really empowers the kids, is when you give them voice and choice, not only on their projects, like with menu items. I've gone to, with art projects, menu items, and the projects are so vastly different now than they used to be, pretty similar. And it's because the kids want voice and choice.
She said the magic word, empower. And if you are dealing with a student that can share planning with you, you will empower that student. You have created a plan together, and what did we learn years ago? People support what they create. So that child is probably not going to sabotage a plan that he helped create.
Okay, one last question on philosophy.
So how would you go about working with a child who is stubborn? You ask them, you give them a choice. What would help you? How can we get this worked out together? And they say, I don't want to. I just don't want to do it. But it's required. How do you make it to where they're still making that choice, but they aren't willing to give it? How do you get them to help?
I think critical in your situation is that a pattern with that child, or is that a blip on the screen? Start taking data. Is it 5 times a day, 5 times a class period, once every 3 weeks? In that way, you can determine what you need. If you need an outside resource to help you create a plan, or if you just have some random behavior happening.
Yeah. Because you may have the kid, they take their meds first thing in the morning, and so they'll always be dozing off in your first hour, and they can't really help that. So you find a way that later in the day, can you catch that up, or can you make a deal with them that they will try to stay engaged during direct instruction or getting the information, and then if they have to doze, they can doze, and that they're going to come back to you later in the day to make up the rest and do that. Because, I mean, our kids have lives away from school, and there may be other factors that are, coming into play, that why, did Dad get arrested for domestic violence last night, and so we're going to hate the world, for the next week.
There's also something, and I'm trying to remember, us flipping through people in my head. There's 10 for 10. Have you heard of that? It's 10 seconds. I know it doesn't sound like very long. For 10 days, consecutive days, connect with that student. And whether it's a hello and how you doing, and wow, those shoes are cool. How'd you get? They're the new thing. And you will see the most amazing differences, because like you said earlier, connecting with the kids. They want to have a relationship with adults. And sometimes they don't even know they want to have a relationship with an adult. But when you connect, you'll just have amazing results. So 10 for 10.
Two things, make sure you take away the audience. Some kids are not good in front of anybody else, so you want to make those plans with them when there's no audience, when it's
Absolutely.
one-on-one. Also, make sure you get used to, as a teacher, saying, I need rather than you need. You need is what they can fight against. No, I don't. But if you say, I need for you to choose one of these three things that I need it, they can't say, no, you don't, but they can, so I need statements are really more effective than you need to do this, then you need to do this, then you just turn that around to, I need for you to do this before you start this. It makes the biggest difference.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question for a very short response was to go down the panel. Who or what provides you the support needed to continue effective teaching?
Relationships with students, colleagues, and building leaders.
And I said the relationships with my students, my colleagues, and my family.
My teammates at school, and then the professional learning social studies community that I've built.
I find that my support comes from those who have walked in my shoes.
I said colleagues, a time to interact with them, and family.
What provides support for me? My principal, my staff, my students, and naps.
I said connecting with others in your subject area, mainly because art and drama, sometimes we're islands, and we need to connect with other people that teach our same subject matter.
Good. So I heard a lot about relationships, and I think that's one of the myths about classroom teaching is that you're all by yourself, and it's not, because you have this whole series of people you're going to need to surround yourselves with. So if you want to, we can elaborate on that.
When we were talking about some of these questions as a group, we all came up with a lot of the things, our co-workers and that. Don't try to do this alone. Yes, you'll have your own classrooms. Yes, you'll have your own responsibilities, but don't try to take it all on the chin. I've worked with a lot of new teachers, first-year teachers, and they want to go in there and they don't want to seem weak and all this, and then I finally ask them, well, have you had your first big cry yet this year? Because everybody has that first big cry that first year of teaching. Some of us have that 26th year of teaching. But don't try to do it yourself. Don't isolate yourself. And in some content areas, like a lot of core subject areas, or if you're in an elementary school that has multiple classes at the same grade level, you might even have team time built in. That's part of the middle school concept. But then again, I'm the only drama teacher in my school, but I do find time to connect with the art teacher. But I also try to connect with people outside of the classroom because, and with each other. I mean, you all know how important it is to connect with other people. We're living in a society where everything is about connections and that, but find those healthy connections. But also, one thing that we didn't talk a lot about was we said, yes, we do get support from our students, but that can't be your primary source of support because we talked about, what about those students that don't support what you're doing, or that don't like your teaching, or that don't like, that seem to draw, take your supports away. And one of the phrases that popped into my mind that I have to remind myself from time to time when it comes to dealing with students, it's none of my business what you think of me. It's really not my business. I can't make you like me. I can do what I know that I can do, our best practices. I know what I can do as far as my philosophy goes. I know what I can do to get my job done. But if I get hung up that you're not going to like me, or that you're not going to get this, or that's what pulls me down faster than anything. So if I just have to kind of realign myself, you do have to self-support in this business. That's just part of it. That's why naps are important. You know, the hungry, angry, lonely, tired. We've all heard of HALT. Don't make any decisions when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. So that lonely piece right in there, make those connections with other staff. Don't be afraid to go to people. When you get assigned a mentor in a school, go to that mentor. Don't be afraid. Don't think, oh, I should know the answer to this. Well, if you should know the answer, then you would, but obviously you don't, so go get it. You know, don't try to do this yourself. Don't do this alone.
We tell kids it's okay to ask for help. We need to remind ourselves of that sometimes. It's okay to ask for help.
When I first started teaching, I was the social studies department in my building. There were other people in other buildings but that wasn't really very convenient. And so I'm in a building now where we are on a team, so I have daily time to meet with people who teach language arts and science and reading and math, and we all share the same kids. And so it's easy to bounce ideas off of them as well. And so that's something that's been a plus there. We've also had time to meet as a department, more so in the last several years than earlier. And so that's allowed us to all be on the same page, and to, if somebody's having difficulty or somebody has a good idea, here's what worked for me, and just the time to interact between colleagues is a really, really big deal.
I think sometimes that what he said is confused with what is real. You did a good job. I'm saying I agree with you, because what a lot of times first-year teachers or new teachers go out and they want to be connected with their kids, but they try to do it as a friendship. And what you have to do is separate the friendship from the respect that you need from your kids. So you can't go at it as a friend, like he said. What they think of you really isn't as important as the respect that they will have for you if you place boundaries and if you work with them and find out what they need.
Okay, next question. What is one of the biggest strengths in education today?
Opportunities for collaboration with other staff members.
The dedication of quality teachers.
Technology.
The focus on teaching students to think.
Professional, dedicated teachers.
And opportunities for instruction and learning.
Flexibility.
And as teacher education students, we feel that education, the students coming out of the classroom or coming out of the universities now are probably in the best position ever. And technology has given that with the proper training, and then the technology has opened up the world for our students. There's no reason that your students in your classroom, K through 12, can't be connected to other students in other states, maybe even other countries. There's so many resources out there to get them interacting with their peers, and to give them an authentic educational experience, so that when they leave the K-12 environment, they're going to be more prepared than any generation up to this point. And to go back to kind of when we're talking about the community, and like Reed said about not doing it alone, with the collaboration, that doesn't have to just be in your building either, because you may end up in a building where maybe you don't mesh super great with the other educators in your building, but through Twitter, through Google Hangouts, through all sorts of different ways, you can connect with other educators from around the country, and you can build your own PLC. There's a Google Calendar you can find that has every single ed chat out there. And so if you're social studies, if you're English, if you're art, if you're anything, there is 1 hour someday during the week that your educators are getting online and having discussions and having a theme each month or each week about a different topic. And different organizations within your field are hosting those chats. So just in the last month and a half or so in social studies, UNICEF has hosted one of Museum. This last one this week was the English Social Studies combined chat that happens at the end of every month. Different organizations are out there to help you with resources, and you can connect with those other teachers. You can even use just that hashtag. If I throw out a hashtag SS chat and say, hey, does anyone have a lesson on the emancipation? People are going to throw back ideas at me. So we have those resources out there besides just what some excellent organizations are doing out there, that you don't have to just go to your file cabinet. You can go to the entire, world and be able to have access, to, unlimited resources.
This may be a different take on the same question, but one of the things that I think is a strength of education is that it has so many diverse professional organizations. And for instance, the one for art in Kansas, or there's more than one, but the one primarily is Kansas Art Education Association. And when you go to the conferences and when you connect with other art or professionals that do the same thing as you, you come back refreshed, invigorated, with tons of ideas, just like you can do, but it's in person. Sometimes one works at one time a year. By the time you're midway of the year, you just want to connect with somebody to get some new stuff. Find something that works for you that will give you what you need, even if it's mid-year. Find that connection.
Yeah, Ginger has a great point. Look into your content area and your professional organizations. There's generally the state level of whatever professional organization, there's the national level, and most of the national organizations rotate where their national conference is. So they generally go West Coast, Middle, East Coast, and rotate. So generally, at least in a 3-4 year cycle, there's going to be something at least in your region that you can go and make those connections. And we're making more and more, I know in NCSS, the National Council for the Social Studies, we're trying to do as much as we can to reach out to the communities where those conferences are being held. We're trying, I know there are unconferences now, so you can come and show up and you get to talk about what you want to talk about, and you decide as a group, this is what I want to learn about. I know about this, and let's share resources. And there's more and more of that happening. So definitely look at those professional organizations, and some of our service centers do some excellent things as far as like state level professional development.
So from a big picture look, what have you heard so far for sure? Relationships and resources. Keep that in mind.
Any other comments?
It is easy in any organization, any profession, to start talking about the challenges. Voicing concerns, but unless you think about it thoroughly and find how you can recommend to fix the problem or make it different, change of course, they're just empty words. So this is actually a double question. The first question I'm going to ask for a quick response is, what is one of the biggest challenges teachers are facing today?
Factors outside of our control.
Meeting the varied needs of the students in the class.
Polarization, segregation, economic segregation of communities.
Huge expectations from districts, parents, and students.
School finances and the integration of technology.
The perception and misperception of public education.
I would echo that, and then I would say that, well, I'll just echo that.
So, just on the end of that, what are the recommendations for what your biggest challenge you think it is?
I need to stay focused and remember what is within my locus of control.
And since I said meeting the variety of needs in my classroom, I have to partner with other colleagues so that we can broaden our ability to reach those kids. I might not be able to reach all of them, but with 3 of us, we can reach that many more. And to make sure we teach the kids and not the curriculum.
kind of in the same vein. Do what's best for kids within your realm of control. Just keep in mind, is what you're doing best for the kids? And then on the other end, advocate. Advocate for yourself, advocate for your students. If you can corner a parent, if you can corner a business member of your community, advocate, say what good things are happening in our schools. Because our schools are doing some excellent stuff, and we need to get that out there.
I mentioned district, parents, and students having high expectations. The answer to all three is communicate, communicate, communicate. Be proactive and keep those lines of communication open for what's going on. Like you said, advocate for what's going on that's good, communicate what's going well, communicate problems, communicate what you feel like you can't handle. Just communicate, communicate, communicate.
I mentioned school finance and the integration of technology, and so legislature is sort of out of our control a little bit, but it'd be nice if they did listen to educational professionals every once in a while, but we can always contact them and so forth. But making good use of whatever resources we do have is something that we could do. And one of the things there as far as integration and technology, those are sort of tied together because we have technology, but technology becomes out of date, and it takes its finances to get those up and going again. Some are trying to get initial technology at this point as well, and so the finances will sort of influence that as well. And if you're faced with new things, new ideas, whatever it is, we've heard this before, don't be afraid to ask questions. I went to, we were having a committee meeting, and I went to at the science department had been looking at some new technology, and so I knew they'd already looked at it, and so I went and tagged on to them. And they had somebody come in and speak, and they got to the end, they said, anybody have any questions? I had lots of questions, but I knew the science department had already been looking at it, so I didn't say anything. I thought, I'll ask my science colleagues, and they'll tell me that. And so when I started after the meeting asking them, okay, what about this, and they said, well, we don't know that either. And so I wish I had spoken up and asked questions there. So if you've got a question, don't be afraid to ask it. I tell my students this all the time. If you've got a question, probably there are half a dozen other kids in this class that have that same question. And so I need to take my own advice.
My answer about the public perception or misconception of teachers or what we do. I took a course this summer, part of my continuing ed, Teachers in Pop Culture, where I got to watch, I think it was 47 or 48 movies, a good summer class, about teachers and reflect on them and the, everybody kind of thinks they know what goes on in schools because they all went to school. So they know how to teach because I was a student once and I had a teacher, and boy, she was a battle axe, and I'll tell you what. And that's, unfortunately, there's a lot of perception. So what can we do about that? You've got to make your voices heard as educators. My Facebook friends, I think, probably sometimes get a little sick of me, bragging up what's happening in schools in public education, but if we don't do it, who will? I've had a state representative. I invited him to come in to speak to my class. He and I are on about polar opposite ends of the political spectrum. But I had him come in. Why? Because I wanted him to come into a school to see what was going on, because we all know the great things that are happening. Teachers don't do a very good job of bragging themselves up. We were talking about this earlier. It's kind of hard for us to be in the limelight sometimes, but yet we need to get that show the good things that are happening. There are a lot of people out there that don't want that to happen, and I don't want to bring things down or get political or anything, but there are groups out there that are making presentations about what's wrong with our public schools and what needs to change and what's wrong with education. And a lot of those people that are doing that have nothing to do with our profession. We're the professionals. We're the ones that have our master's degree. We're the ones that have studied and spent time in this. And if we don't speak up, if we don't belong to those organizations that will help get that answer across, I think we're kind of sinking it ourselves. So don't be afraid to be proud of who you are. Surveys have been done where in places where people have a downside of education, but yet they support their local schools. They think their school is great, but they think overall education is down. Well, if everybody thinks our school is great, there's a disconnect there somewhere. And I think that connection comes in how we present ourselves to the public. You may be the only teacher that some people ever see. So that's why I think it's important to get out there, not just stay confined with your own people in your own profession, but get out there and communicate with those people that, and let them know. Invite them into your classroom. One school I went to, we had teacher for a day where community members could sign up and they shadowed a teacher all day long. And not one of them left feeling energized. They all left dog tired because they found out what it was like and what we go through. But yet they left with a whole new perception of what we do every day and the great things that happen in our schools. So I think that's what we really need to, that's one of the areas we really need to focus on as educators.
Well, and as new teachers, I really think it's important that you become involved. You know, whether you're involved with your local NEA or in your curriculum groups or whatever, you have to be involved. You have to be part of the change. If we're not going out and telling people what we want or what we think we need, who's going to do that for us? You have to become involved. You have to go to school board meetings. You have to go to all the other meetings, city commission meetings. You have to be a leader, a math lead teacher or something. You need to be involved. You need to be a leader. You need to be on committees. You need to do it. All of us have papers to grade. All of us have other things to do. All of us have families. But if you're not willing to get involved, it's not going to happen.
I said perception too, and we must be just thinking alike today. The people outside of education think that they know what's best for education, and that's not working, because the people that are outside of education are often business people, and it's been proven many times over that business models don't always work for schools. And so what I say is get seen. With art, I'm out there making sure that my kids' artwork is displayed in banks and museums and at fairs and in the library. And I think that if you can have any kind of impact on your community, get involved with your PTO, with your parent groups, do a special activity. The second grade in our school does the popcorn unit, and they go to the bank and they take out a loan and they make a business and they sell orders and stuff. They get in the newspaper. That's when you have an impact, because people believe when they see. You can give lip service to stuff, but when they actually see you active in what you're doing and caring about and giving the kids experiences that are beyond the walls of the school, then that's when they start really taking notice.
The last thing I'll say, this just may come up as far as perception, because it's happened every year. So it must be nice to have your summers off. Well, we don't have our summers off. First of all, I don't know if you know this, but you don't get paid for your summers. You get paid for the days that you teach. Yeah, you can spread that out over your summers, but when I tell people that, I call that my involuntary unpaid furlough. That's my summer vacation or my spring break. But I also let them know that I am taking classes, I'm continuing on, or that I'm teaching summer school, or that I'm doing these things, that it's not just a summer off. Yes, we do need that time to re-energize. This year, my district, we get a week-long spring break. I forced myself not to go into school those days, and that was very hard. This is the first year in 26 years I haven't gone back in just for a day, just to tidy up or take care of a few things, because then I ended up staying there the whole day working. I needed that time off to be re-energized. I'm going to get exhausted by the end of that first week back anyway, so why shouldn't I have that week off, or that time off to re-energize? There again, that's that part of taking care of yourself. But yet, if I just went on Facebook and put on there, I can't wait to go to Cancun this summer or whatever, then that kind of perpetuates that idea. So don't be afraid to let your friends know that, I'm a professional. It is a career. Yes, I have some time that I'm not required to be in my building. It's not part of my contract day, which we all go in work longer hours than that anyway. But I think just things like that. So there's my 2 cents again. I'm up to about $1.50 now.
And it might be mildly tangential because we're saying go, 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 but very much like Reed said, you can also say no. You do have to take, especially as a first-year teacher, you're going to be zapped. you are gonna be doing everything you can just to keep your head above water. And you can say no, and I've tried to make the rule that yes, I may be at school until 6, but once I leave, I'm done. I try to turn off. I try to keep those few hours to myself so I can be a decent human being, because otherwise I'm not very nice. I've learned I need my 8 hours of sleep or it's not pretty. So, I mean, learn what's good for you, and no, maybe you don't need to be that sponsor, because they love getting you first year teachers. Hey, do you want to, hey, I know you could, no, you can draw a line. Decide what's good for you and draw that line and try to stick to it, because especially that first year, you've got enough other things to figure out. That yes, keep connected with your peers. Try to keep a personal life. You know, just a little bit. Hang on to something so that you're still you. You are not just teacher, Mr. or Ms. somebody. Be you. Sleep. Eat. It's a good thing.
And every paper does not have to be graded.
Process, not product.
But don't put them in the school trash.
Yes.
I think that's either his recycling bin. Shredder.
Okay, we have 186 years of experience up here.
Oh.
I am sure you have concerns, anxieties, things that may be challenged. Now's the time to field some questions from the audience.
I have one real quick. What do you do? Like, I had an experience not too long ago where I'm at the Block 3 intern, and my teacher looked at me and she said, "You take him over there now." Okay, she just had enough of this. She said I was going to kill him. What do you do if you don't have an intern or something like that, and you're stuck with that student that just wants to continue? Because teachers have bad days, bad nights, whatever, and they just want to keep pushing. What do you do with that one kid that just wants to push one more time?
Well, at the elementary level, we have a strategy, at least in my building, we have a strategy. You fold up a blank sheet of paper and say, "I've got this note. Would you please take it to Miss so-and-so?" And that'll give you a good 10 minutes of breathing time.
Because they can take their
One thing that I found too, when a kid is pushing my buttons, sometimes I have to make that disconnect and go, well, wait a second, why is this kid getting under my skin? Is this the hill I want to die on with this kid? Choose your battles. Yeah, choose your battles and go, you know what, I'm the adult here.
And walk away.
Pardon the French, but my first year of teaching, I had an old battle axe like me tell me, never get into a pissing contest with a skunk because you never win. And to me, that is stuck in my brain. So maybe this was passing it on. But I know. Hi.
This is the NVIDIA.
Yes.
Yeah. Next year's group will get to
Yes, that's right. But that's it. I mean, if you know you're not going to win, why am I going to go into this fight? But I'm not going to fight with you. You're going to let the whirling dervish whirl. Let it go if it needs, as long as it's not hurting anybody or anything. But that's, I don't know how else to say it. But don't let it be the adult in the situation. There are those days where that kid's going to do that, but that's when you can take that step back. And realize, okay, I'm getting into this, and you're pushing my buttons, and I'm pushing your buttons, and let's just all, when it hits the fan, unplug the fan.
I was going to say, there actually was a good in-service. They do exist. It's not just getting caught up on grading or planning ahead or playing on Facebook. Because you get into both the student and you will go to your lizard brains, and you're just going to keep going. And it was the catchphrase, spin and walk away. Because it does come to that point where you just know you have to disengage, because you too are, yes, you're in that pissing match, and it's like, once you realize, oh, wait, okay, and you just walk away.
Well, and that's the part of the recognition thing, because you have to recognize when that's happening, and sometimes it takes a minute to recognize it. But I have a teacher that I know that says, she, in her head, says, I need a timeout. And so that's how she walks away. If you're a parent, when you have little people, you give them a timeout. You set them in a chair and say, okay, you've got 5 minutes. And that gives you and them a break time. You need it just the same at any age level. And sometimes we're the ones that need the timeout.
And kids do recognize that, at least my
They
experience,
do.
they recognize it and they respect that. If you just say, you know what, I need 2 minutes right here at my desk, I'll take questions in 2 minutes, maybe somebody else out there, 3 before me, ask 3 other people before you come to me. And sometimes that just gives you that 2 minutes just to gather yourself. It doesn't mean you get to leave the room or anything, but just, be good to yourself.
2 things that I've used from professional development in services that were good. And you have to figure out what's good for me might not work for him at all. There are hundreds of behavior intervention type theories out there. One of them is to have a buddy room with the neighboring person. You say, when you are at your wit's end with Johnny, he's going to come to your room with a blank index card or whatever, is a yellow pass. Same thing, and you have that mutual agreement that that's just a cool down time. You have that buddy room. The other one is, and it comes from an old Love and Logic, Jim Fay, is it scares kids more what you're going to possibly do with them if you say, can you stay after when the bell rings? This works for the high school kids. You can have 30 minutes left in the class, and if you walk back and say, I need for you to stay after when the bell rings, sometimes the bad behavior stops immediately because just the anticipation of, oh my, what's going to happen? What's she going to do? Then they all of a sudden are trying in that last 30 minutes to make it up to you to turn the tide, what's going to happen in 30 minutes. So, removing them or just putting off the consequence and saying, we're going to take care of this. And that you can say things like that. We're going to take care of this, but I can't take care of it right now. So when the bell rings, stay put. That can be the most glorious 30 minutes of the class because they're all of a sudden going, I know, they're trying to make it up to you immediately.
And that does do something that we talked about earlier as well. That removes him from the audience as well. And so one-on-one is always a lot better than if you're doing that in front of their peers.
But the bottom line is follow through. Because if they know that they can blow it off and they can leave, and then your reputation then has to be built back up in terms of the respect that you've developed with the kids. So make sure to follow through.
Any other questions, concerns people have? Yes.
I'm sure all of you have had this situation that it's not a what would you do situation, but it's a what, how did you react kind of situation. You always at some point in your career, you come across a student that you can't save. I'm sure everyone can think of one. How did you handle that situation? Like when it came across to you, you realized you can't save your student.
You can only do what you can do. And so do your best effort. And you do have to sort of, that's a difficult situation, but you can only do so much. So do everything you can and be consoled that you did your best.
It doesn't mean that you're not going to be emotional or be upset or anything, because the connections that you make. One of my 5th graders went to jail, went to juvenile after he left my class. So I understand what you're saying. I couldn't save him from his life. What I did, though, was when he was in my class, I did everything I could to put in place structures that he could continue.
So
And
I'm
that's what we have
hearing that we would do everything we could within our locus of control. And factors outside of our control, it's not that we become hardened or unemotional about it, but rather keep a gauge on what we can and cannot have any say in, and know that it wasn't because of something that we didn't do.
Well, and that goes for those kids out there that drive you insane and do everything they can to drive you nuts. And we have a few of those this year, and one of our newer teachers has one, and the parents are not supportive of you. Have you ever had a child whose parents were supportive? And they're not doing anything for this child. And this teacher's just really worried about it. And I said, hey, and she's really upset with the parents, which I think we have a right to be, but we can't do anything. I said, here's your realization. You have that child for 9 months. They have him for 18 years. So they're going to have to come up against it sometime. Don't take all the responsibility for that child. There are other factors imposing on.
I would say also, it takes a village. And so you are not the only person that's working with that child. And if you can find a way to find people that can help, because sometimes you've connected with them in a very special relationship, and that relationship isn't what they need right now. They need this. And so you have to almost let go of that, that kind of connection a little bit, and get them connected to other people, knowing that that's what's best for them.
I used to teach at Annie Sullivan Elementary School in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And Annie Sullivan was Helen Keller's teacher, and our saying was, we may work at Annie Sullivan, but we're not miracle workers. Because we could do what we could do, and we did. And was it sad when somebody, didn't reach our expectations, or if something happened? Yes. But you also have to remember that you probably did more than you realized for that student. That there's something that you planted. You planted some seed in there somewhere. If you're an elementary school teacher, you're with those kids for 6, 7 hours a day. If you're a middle schooler, you're with those kids when they're starting to become human. Or not, but they're at least in the process, or not. We don't know what they are really yet. And if you're with them at high school, they're at a time where you're closest to them at their adult life, and so you have an influence, and and so you can't get down on yourself. There are things out of our control. There are a lot of safety nets in place at my school. We meet weekly. Even the expo team, the specials teams, and all the core. And we have student support team meetings where we bring up kids and we try to make sure nobody slips through the cracks. But yet, even that kid that comes up every week, and that still may slip through. But yet, down the road somewhere, there may be something. And so we can't save them all right now, but you never know what you may have done that will help them in the future.
And they'll come back to you and they'll tell you about it.
They do.
Because
my student that ended up in juvenile, he sent me a note that said, thank you for all the things you tried to do for me. So
they
know.
They do that, but you may never hear that as well.
Right.
Okay? There are students that come back or write notes or something like that, but the majority of them probably will not. And so you will never know the positive effect that you've had on a lot of people. I got a note from an 8th grade girl a year after I had her that thanked me for the things we did in class and how interesting it was and all those kind of things. I would have said she just barely tolerated me that year. I would have had no clue at all. So
we're all in this room because we care. I mean, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this. You wouldn't be there. One of my classes this summer, last summer, besides the movie class, we got to tour the state penitentiary. So, look for those fun classes like that. And one of our teachers, one of the teachers that was on our group, not in my school, but from a different district, we got to walk through the cell blocks, and we even got to walk through maximum security, and she saw the name of one of her students on the door. She had heard that he had gone, and she was a mess the rest of the day because not so much that she felt like she caused that, but she knew that she remembered what she saw, But we told her, we said, there's a lot of things out of our control, but there again, maybe that you did something. If you do all that you can do, that's all you can do.
Yeah. It goes back to the self-preservation piece.
Yeah.
You have to find a way to be right with yourself. If you do know, and like we keep saying, if you know you've done everything, there comes a time when you have to forgive yourself. You know you did everything you could. There's too much in their worlds that are out of our control. So you just have to get right with yourself and be able to, rationalize that to yourself.
I've had students my most devastating moment was the first time I had to flunk students in Algebra 1. had to fail them. I didn't want anybody to have an F, but they failed. They had to come back and repeat it. Guess who their teacher was? They're back to me. I learned now that what I thought was the most devastating thing to deal with was one of the best things that happened for those kids, because every single one of them, the second time through, they were more mature. They admitted, at some point, all of them said, yeah, I was a mess last year. I didn't do my work. It was the most positive thing that I ever got to see, was that they were ready a year later. There was just something going on with them, either, outside of my control, or just they weren't ready for the material, whatever it was. It turned out every single time I had them come back, they were back in my room. There was nowhere else for them to go. And I used to threaten them, if you don't pass, you're going to be back in here with me. So they knew that. But it always turned out to be a success for them. It was a delayed success, but they were able to then say, I overcame that. So there's a plus side sometimes.
Okay, one last question before the speed round. What attribute will teachers need to adapt to the future of K-12 education? So you take a quick response from everybody, then give about 5 minutes to elaborate.
The resilience to be a lifelong learner.
I think you're going to need to do more with less and with more love and perseverance.
The overarching flexibility, that ability to adapt year to year, day to day, hour to hour.
And again, flexibility.
I said flexibility as well.
Resiliency and flexibility.
Flexibility, resiliency, and being open to change.
We talked about the fact that you heard all the years that we've all been in education. So we've seen educational trends and educational thought and educational programs come and go and be replaced by this one's going to be better than the last. And as a teacher, you have to be flexible enough to accept what comes along. You feel like you're kind of being punched this way and punched this way. Don't let it knock you down. Don't let it stifle you and make it your focus to fight against change, because then you won't grow, you won't adapt, you won't be able to focus on your students and your classroom. But know that what you're learning right now in your classes and the educational books that they're having you refer to and the thoughts of education, some of that's going to stay and some of it's going to fluctuate to some other famous author and this other person and this other method of teaching. And you have to be like, it's kind of like your wardrobe. You have to have that classic white shirt, guys, and the little black dress. Those are your things that you stick to. Those are your things that work with kids, and you hold on to those things that work with kids, that you've seen successes and you've seen the smiles on their faces, that they get it and they like that, they love that unit. But you've got to adapt how you do it by what those educational trends that come and go. And I see teachers that they just dig in their heels, like, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to change, I'm not going to adapt, I've got my lesson plans laid out for the next 5 years. And they just live this frustrating existence, and you just have to say, okay, let's see, what can I hang on to, what can I adapt? You just have to be flexible, and you have to go with change, because, new innovative things are going to help improve how kids learn. Things that are research-based show that kids learn better. You want to go with those. But hang on to the things that, you see really work with kids, and then, buy those trendy outfits and know that they're going to
Accessorize.
Accessorize, and then you'll hold up and they go, oh, why did I ever buy that? Because those kind of things come and go, but there's the classic educational practices that'll always be in place.
What a great description.
Yes, it is. The question again was, what attribute will teachers need to adapt to the future of education? I mean, there's a lot of things that you will have to have, but one thing that we've been stressing at our school is hope. I think hope is something you have to have. The Gallup organization, they're the Gallup polls that do all the survey, and they have, thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of data back with them. And I forget his first name, Mr. Lopez, that works for the Gallup, but anyway, it slips my head. But Shane Lopez, thank you. We got to meet with him because he started these schools of hope. When the students, middle school students do these surveys, they do a student survey that measures 3 things. It measures, I think it's well-being, student engagement, and hope. And with all the different questions, they find that out of those 3, the one that's the best indicator of student achievement is their hope. The higher level of hope a student has, doesn't matter how engaged they are. I mean, it does matter how engaged they are, but even more than how engaged they are, it's their process of hope. And I really think that's an indicator of a success of a teacher too, if you continue to look toward the future and hope.
All right, thank you. This last section, I have 8, what I call my speed round questions. I think we'll start with Ginger this time because I feel sorry that she's always into last. I'm going to ask a question in 1, 2, 3, 4 words. They're going to respond, and we're going to do 8 of these in the series. So, first question: your age when you first knew that you wanted to be a teacher?
I don't know. I'd say 17 was when it was solidified.
Always.
Sort of always, but when I finally made the decision, I think I was 19.
8 years old.
23, 24. This was my second go around.
I've always wanted to be a teacher.
20.
Name your most recent pedagogical read.
Is that me again? Change your brain, change your life.
Whatever It Takes, the PLC book by Rick DeFore.
Why don't you just tell us the answer, Teaching Historical Thinking in grades 7 through 12?
Leaders of Learning, another DeFore book, and Robert Marzano.
I'm sticking with SS Chat.
The Writing Thief by Ruth Cull.
Explicit Instruction, Anita Archer and Charles Hughes.
Okay. And then name the pedagogical read that you have had for years, one that is still very close to your desk.
Drawing on the right side of the brain, any kind of brain information. Envisioning Writing was a textbook that when I was teaching a beginning class in college, that was one of the texts, and it had a lot of good information in it.
Laughter in the Classroom, and I don't remember the author, but he's funny.
What is a professional learning community by Richard DeFore?
First Days of School by Harry Wong.
Reading Like a Historian, Weinberg.
Culture of Poverty by Ruby Payne.
Explicit Instruction, Anita Archer, Charles Hughes.
Is teaching more of an art or more of a science?
I have certification in both. I find them very hard. So I say they are inseparable.
I say inseparable too, but I lean a little more on the art side, that the art of teaching, it's a craft.
Now, I was going to say both. You need sort of the structure and behaviors of science, but then that creativity of art.
I say art because you are a performer every single day.
Edutainment.
Yes.
I too said both, in the respect that you experiment, there are subjects and variables, but there's definitely an art to learning how to lead a group of kids down the path you want. Or down the hall some days. Some days it's just down the hall.
I think that teaching is the art of applying the science.
Well said. Volumes have been written about this. I think it is a combination of both.
Name the element of which you wish you had more.
And the 3 were time, money, and energy.
Well, those are suggestions.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You could
I
do it
thought
your
that's
own.
what I had to choose from. And, okay. Time probably, time with the kids, time to do the things that they need.
Time.
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 Time, or at least a very good grader.
Time, and as I'm getting closer to the end of my career, energy also.
I'm going to say the ability to mandate attitude.
Oh, I like that.
Okay?
Can I
Name 3 adjectives to describe your teaching.
Well, I don't know, I just kind of wrote down 3 words, I don't know that they qualify. But I would say flexible, perceptive, and creative.
Energetic, entertaining, and hopeful.
I had enthusiastic, respectful, and visual.
I polled my fellow staff. They gave me inclusive, innovative, and compassionate.
I didn't prep this one. I meant to ask my reading seminar yesterday, and I forgot to ask them because they were running around the field because it was too nice. So I guess we'll go with energetic, loud, and something else.
Fill that.
Intangible quality. I'd say structured, flexible, and demanding. And yes, you can be both.
Passionate, proud, and purposeful.
Name 2 talents or skills you want your students to have when they leave your classroom.
I would like them to be able to visualize ideas, to formulate them and be able to just visualize them. And the other one is creative confidence.
I cheated on this one and I combined a few so I could come up with my 2. Being able to communicate and think critically, that's 1. And hope, being able to hope, because it is a skill that you can teach, and I think it's an important skill that we do teach.
I had down the ability to answer questions for themselves, to figure those things out, and the ability to connect choices with consequences.
I want my students to be comfortable working in groups and presenting in front of the class. And I want them to also be okay with making mistakes.
Perseverance and critical thinking, which I think kind of go hand in hand.
I'd like for my kids to leave knowing that they can be a valuable team member and to be able to challenge themselves.
I want students to have task-specific strategies and critical thinking skills so that they can be lifelong learners.
And the final question, which will take us exactly to 3:45. You guys did a wonderful job. You timed this out just perfectly. What piece of advice would you provide a first-year teacher on her or his first day?
Make it your goal to connect.
Don't try to do this alone and buckle up.
The students are just as nervous as you are on the first day of school. Also, longer range, don't decide whether you, don't give up on teaching if you have a bad day, or even after your first year of teaching. Teach at least 2 years, because your second year of teaching is going to be so different from your first. You're going to learn so much your first year of teaching that even if you think, man, I'm not sure about this, give it a second year.
Be organized, set the tone for risk-free learning, and wear good shoes.
No hills.
Yeah, never teach.
Never
don't teach.
hills.
The kind of, like I said before, the take time for yourself. Teaching is a marathon, it is not a sprint. So if you throw it all out there in the first 9 weeks, you've still got 3 more 9 weeks left. So, make sure you have reserves If you start getting sick, take care of yourself. Don't keep pushing, because you're not going to be any good to your kids. You're not going to be an effective instructor if you aren't healthy.
Teaching's not for the faint of heart. Relax your first year and hold on tight to someone that is close.
I say keep a balance.
Well, I would like to thank each of you. I think this has been a very enlightful 75 minutes, and so I'm sure everyone in the audience will join me when I applaud.
We have one parting comment for you. We thank you for being here. We think you were probably required to be here. But we're glad that you were here, and we thank you for your attention. We saw some of you taking notes, some of you taking notes. And we hope that you have at least 1 to 3 takeaways. Something that, 75 minutes, just like you know. We go to in-services 75 minutes. Oh my gosh, take 1, maybe 2. Get a specific takeaway and work on that. You can't do this all at one time, but we thank you for being here. We know you might have had other things to do.
It's a lovely day and there's no windows in here.
Yeah. So we applaud you.
Yes. Now go frolic. Skip that next class.
Get a balance.